A $1,524.99 RTX 5080 with 4.6 stars should feel almost untouchable, but owners keep circling one uncomfortable catch. This is the ASUS TUF Gaming GeForce RTX 5080 OC Edition, a 16GB GDDR7 card built around NVIDIA Blackwell and DLSS 4. The real question is not whether it is powerful, it is whether the TUF design makes the price feel justified. From the box alone, ASUS is selling this as a serious high-end card, not a subtle upgrade. The packaging highlights OC Edition, 16GB GDDR7 memory, GPU Tweak 3, Aura Sync, DLSS 4, ray tracing, reflex, and studio support. That tells you the target buyer immediately: gaming, creation, and heavy GPU workloads. The cooling story is the first thing that separates this card from a basic spec sheet. ASUS lists a 3/6 slot design, a massive fin array, 3 Axial Tech fans, and a phase change GPU thermal pad. On paper, that means the cooler is not an accessory here, it is a major part of the product. That matters because owners are not just praising raw frame rates. 13 customers mention cooling, and every one of those mentions in the data is positive. One owner who moved from an older high-end card was surprised by how cool this one ran, even during benchmarks. Look at the front view. 3 large fans dominate almost the entire card face. The shroud is broad, angular, and open enough that you can see the heatsink behind the blades. This is why the card looks less like a compact PC part and more like a cooling module with a GPU attached. My take: the most convincing part of this card is not the OC label. It is that the owner feedback lines up with the cooler design. When people say it runs cool and stays quiet under gaming and generative AI loads, that is exactly the kind of praise that makes a premium cooler matter. The next proof point is noise. 12 customers mention quiet operation, and the data shows all 12 as positive. Owners repeatedly describe it as very quiet, with one specifically saying it stayed quiet even under high GPU load. The backplate tells the same story from the other side. You can see large vent openings, a rigid metal structure, and the exposed heatsink section near the far end. This is also where the card starts to look physically serious, because the cooling hardware clearly takes up real space. Here is the useful takeaway. Owners are not only saying it is fast, they are saying it is fast without becoming an obnoxious noise source. For a card in this class, that combination is the difference between impressive on day one and livable every day. But here is where the buying decision gets more complicated. The same design that helps cooling also creates the complaints around size and weight. This is not a card you casually drop into any random case and forget. Compared with easier, smaller alternatives, the TUF RTX 5080 is the more serious, more demanding choice. You get the heavy cooler, premium feel, military-grade component messaging, and quiet, high-load behavior. The trade-off is practical. Space, support, and price all matter more. This angled shot makes the size obvious. The card is long, thick, and visually dense, with the triple fan cooler stretching almost end to end. Several owners call it huge, and that is not just internet exaggeration. So the comparison is really power versus practicality. If your build has room and you want cool, quiet performance, the TUF approach makes sense. If your case is tight or you hate using GPU supports, the same design becomes the downside. Now the owner data gets interesting. The card sits at 4.6 out of 5 stars from 215 ratings. Performance is the biggest praise category, with 50 mentions, and 46 of those are positive. That rating is important because this is not a cheap impulse buy. At this price, owners are much less forgiving. So when performance feedback stays strongly positive, it suggests the card is delivering what buyers expected from an RTX 5080. But do not miss the other half of the story. Around this point, the verdict is still not obvious. Owners love the performance, cooling, and quiet operation, but the value debate keeps pulling the score back toward reality. The strongest praise is performance. Owners describe big gains over older high-end cards, strong 1440p gaming, and flawless 4K performance in some setups. One buyer summed up the mood simply, expensive, yes, but the jump from a previous 3080 felt very large. Gaming performance gets its own positive signal too. 9 customers mention it, and the data shows all 9 as positive. Owners talk about high graphics settings, very high frame rates, and pairing the card with a strong CPU for a top-tier gaming PC. The second big praise bucket is the cooling and noise balance. The common owner voice is basically, "It is a monster, but it does not sound like one." That is a valuable distinction if your PC sits beside you instead of under a desk across the room. I also think the visible build helps explain why some owners forgive the size. The card looks clean, premium, and industrial, with thick corner plates and a rigid shroud. One owner called it heavy and chonky in a good way, and visually that description fits. Now for the negatives, and they are not mysterious. Value for money has 22 mentions, with mixed sentiment. Some buyers call it worth the money, while others say the current pricing is absurd and should come back down. Size is the next repeated issue. 11 customers mention it, and the feedback is split because large can mean two different things. For some, it means thermal headroom. For others, it means measuring your case before you even think about checkout. Weight follows the same pattern. 8 customers mention it, evenly split between positive and negative sentiment. Several say it feels solid and premium, but multiple owners also warn that you should use a proper GPU support. So here's the catch, the hook promised. Value is the main tension. Owners are mostly convinced by the card itself, but not everyone is convinced by the market price. That is a very different problem from bad performance, and it is exactly why this review cannot be a simple yes. Before the verdict, there are 4 practical things to check. The first is clearance, because the 3/6 slot cooler is not just a marketing line. The second is support, because the accessories photo shows a support piece and owners specifically mention needing one. This accessories image is more useful than it looks. You can see the quick start guide, TUF branded extras, the power adapter cable, and the support style accessory. That lines up with the owner comments about weight being something you should plan for, not ignore. Third, install feedback is mostly positive, but it depends on the right case. 6 customers mention installation, with 5 positive and 1 negative. The owner pattern is clear. When it fits, it is plug and play after drivers and settings. When it does not, the size becomes the whole story. Fourth, do not buy it just because it is an RTX 5080. Buy it because you specifically value the TUF cooling, quiet behavior, and durable build claims. If those do not matter to you, the price becomes much harder to defend. Who should actually buy it? If you are building for high-end 1440p, 4K gaming, AI workloads, or a premium quiet PC, the owner feedback makes this card look very strong. If your budget is already stretched, this is exactly the kind of product where waiting for a better price could be smarter. My verdict: the ASUS TUF RTX 5080 OC looks like a genuinely excellent card trapped inside a difficult price conversation. I would consider it for a roomy premium build where quiet cooling matters. I would skip it for tight cases, budget-first builds, or anyone refusing to use GPU support. Tap follow for more no-fluff GPU reviews, because the next decision is whether a smaller or cheaper card gets you close enough. And that is the real decision. Not whether this TUF is powerful, but whether you need this much card around the GPU. If you are deciding between a premium cooler and a more practical alternative, the next review is the one to watch.